Edna Moon attended the 2007 Society of Air Force Nurses 20th anniversary reunion honoring the World War II flight nurses. As a flight nurse, we asked her to take a few minutes away from the events and festivities to tell a few of her stories from the exciting days 65 years ago.
Well, I was born in Palmyra, Maine, which is about maybe 30 miles south of Bangor. And I lived with a foster parent in Plymouth, Maine, which is about 7 miles from that place, and until I was 16, at which time we only had 2 years of high school in the little town where I lived, and it was a matter of us having to go either to Newport or to Pittsfield, Maine, to go to school, and our mother decided that she would take us at that time. And so we moved to Rhode Island.
How did you end up in the military?
Well, after I graduated and took my state boards, I worked at a little hospital in Wakefield, Rhode Island, and I knew I wasn't going to go anywhere there, and as they said, nursing at that time was what they call social suicide. And they said, well, you mustn't change jobs too often because that looks bad on your resume. And so I decided, well, if I go into the military, they'll think I'm great, and I'll be out from under my problems.
Well, tell me this, because I'm just curious about the way things used to be. Nowadays, a lot of people say, oh, you know, if you go into nursing, you're going to meet a doctor and you'll get married. And nursing is pretty lucrative these days because there's a shortage.
Yeah.
But it sounds like in those days you put so many hours in that you didn't have much of a social life.
Well, the little hospital where I lived, they were all established doctors. There were no interns.
And what was the biggest difference between being a civilian nurse and being a military nurse?
I enjoyed it more.
Why would you enjoy it more? Tell me that.
Well, I was in the military, and you could just pick up lots of dates. The other nurses and I used to sit on the grass outside our barracks, and of course all the young pilots made it a point to go by the nurses' quarters, and of course they always had to stop and talk.
Naturally. Well, we always ask if you do it again. It sounds like you do it again.
Oh, in a New York minute. I loved it. I had initially gone into nursing. Another reason, at that time they had to be nurses to be airline hostesses, and I thought, well, this is what I'll do. And so when I found out that they had flight nurses, I asked my chief nurse about it, and she thought as soon as they were able to get me transferred, she was very cooperative about it. And I went to Bowman Field, Kentucky, which is where I got my flight nurse training.
When you look back on that, what was the most rewarding part of that experience, would you say?
Oh, well, you know, you get down on those islands down in the Pacific, and there was a lot of dengue fever, which at that time they called breakbone fever, and you just, all your bones just really ached, and they wanted us to go over into one of the wards where those soldiers were, and to see what we could. They didn't want us to do anything for them. They just wanted to talk to us.
Well, and that's one of the questions that I'm always curious about, because there's administering to somebody and giving them medicines and tending to their wounds, and then there's a comforting and a giving people hope. And tell me how important that second part of that equation is.
Well, it boosts their morale terribly. And that's what you need. And we had one patient down on Tarawa that had been in a Jeep accident, and he had a very foul mouth, and the corpsman wouldn't let us nurses take care of him. We did for a day or two or something like that. There was nothing to do for him, just wait. He was, as I say, I don't know whether he, I don't think he was conscious actually, but he, as I say, he had this filthy mouth, and the corpsmen were very protective of us.
Walk me through, because now I know you're in the Pacific. Walk me through what the average day Edna would have been in those days. What island you would have been flying out of, how close to the combat you would have been, what the average day would have been like for you.
Well, to begin with, we used to fly into Canton, which was about, and it was a very small atoll.
That's close to Howland Island, isn't it?
I don't know. It's about 2 degrees beyond the equator.
Okay.
And sometimes we'd lay over there, and we had, they built us a little house, and they had a sign over the door, Hell's Angels. And
that would be you.
That would be any of the nurses that went in there.
Very good.
Yeah. And then our first trip, island that we went to was Tarawa. The British pronounce it Tarawa, but I figure that we lost enough of our boys making the landing on that island. The Americans can call it anything they want to.
I think you're right.
Yeah.
Well, tell us what, because see, the public now, we're able to fight wars with so few casualties that they forget what it was like on some of those islands. One island is a year in Iraq. Tell me a little bit about what you saw of those troops coming back on the flights that you were on.
Well, sometimes the Hospital of Hope would pick up some patients, and then they would bring them into Kwajalein, and when they were stabilized, then they would be given to us to fly back to Oahu, at which time they went into Tripler General, and then when they were a little more stabilized, then they would be taken. And to begin with, we did not go to the mainland. We called it the United States the mainland, and somebody else would pick them up and take them back to Hamilton Field, and from Hamilton Field they would be flown to hospitals closer to their homes.
Yes. And when you were saying the Hope, that's the hospital ship Hope.
Right.
Right. Okay.
Right. Right. One of the nurses over there told me one day that this guy came in and had his head all bandaged, and when they removed the bandages, his eyeballs dropped out.
How does a young, not girl, but a young lady like you were in those days, how do you get through stuff like that? That's traumatic and tough for you?
Well, because you feel very badly, but that's all in a day's work.
Did it have an impact on you? Nowadays we might call it secondary post-traumatic stress disorder or something, but you're dealing with trauma day after day after day. Ever nightmares or the kind of thing that you girls would talk about, or?
No. We used to bring, the only thing I ever worried about was coming back on our flights with the boys in body casts. And I thought if we ever went down, I never in the world would be able to save any of them. I'm not a strong swimmer anyway, and it would, now that would have been very traumatic to me, especially if there were sharks swimming around.
Well, in these days, air travel is a lot more reliable. You guys were in a war zone, and a lot of planes did go down out there. That's not a that's not so far-fetched, I guess, what I'm saying.
Well, on the full moon, the Japs would send bombers over our islands, and we would have an alert, and at which time we were supposed to go to a foxhole. We were supposed to take a gas mask with us, and one night I had flown down, and I was awfully tired, and we always slept under mosquito nets, and the alert came, and I was just too tired to get out of bed, and so pretty soon somebody else came back, so I did get up, and I went down, and I sat on this end of this foxhole, and I was so tired I thought I was going to fall off it.
When you look back on those days, what's the first thing that comes to mind? Is there an incident or a time or a place or an island that is almost that snapshot for you of what that time would have been like?
Well, each island was different. When we went into Kwajalein, and that had just been secured, there was a lot of dead Japs there, and they would just have a communal a grave, and it was a matter of 75 Japs buried here, 50 or 100 buried over here, and and of course at that time, even though we made very good friends with the Japanese now, at that time it wasn't traumatic at all. I mean, it was just, that's war. They would have done the same to us.
They would have done the same to us, they did the same to us, and they did a lot worse to us.
Oh yes, especially that Bataan March.
Some of the nurses on that.
Well, in fact, one of those nurses lived in my town, and she said that when the bombing came in, they all went into these caves, and the bombing, all of the silt fell down, and that most of those girls died from lung cancer.
Oh, wow. Well, tell me this. Did you ever have to take care of any Japanese POWs?
Our NCOs would not permit us. They did not want the girls taking care of the Japs at all. They did bring out a load two. Now, my husband was on a trip where they brought out a load two, but no, our NCOs were very protective of us.
How do you think your wartime experience impacted the rest of your life? Either in terms of lessons that you might have learned, or things that, that time of life helped you later on?
Oh, I don't know. As I say, people come up to me and I want to thank you for what you did.
Yes.
Well, we didn't do it for thanks. And it was like you get up in the morning and it's your job. You just go to work. That's your job.
I'm one of those people that say thank you. I mean, you guys are the greatest generation. I won't ask you if you're a hero, but were other nurses heroes, do you think?
Probably.
Tell me about that, because I think they are, but I could use it from somebody who was there and their perspective. You guys put a lot of hours in. You saved a lot of lives, I'm sure.
Well, they tell us we did. But I hope we saved a lot of lives. We put in millions of hours of flight time.
What would you say to the current generation or the next generation of military nurses? If you had a couple of tips, anything from your experience that you think still might apply to those ladies or men, what would you tell them?
Go for it.
Yeah.
Go for it. I enjoyed every minute of it. Of course, we were fortunate. The nurses down on some of those other islands, you see, were stuck.
Yeah.
Whereas we got to fly back to Honolulu. And we used to sometimes pick up things for the nurses that were stationed there. But it made it, I expect, a lot easier for us because we'd get to go to Waikiki Beach or, wherever.
You were telling me about the Golden Gate Bridge. Tell me that story.
Oh, well, I brought in a load of patients one night, and then I guess it was during the day, and the pilot circled Golden Gate Bridge so that the patients could see it. And there's this one patient I had kind of a stocking cap on, and he was on a litter, and I hadn't thought too much. I mean, he was okay, and I hadn't thought too much about it. But I noticed that he couldn't lift his head up so that he could see out the window to see it. And I went over and I lifted his head up so he could look out. And he became quite emotional, and he said, "Oh, I never expected to see that again." And when I lifted his head up, his whole skull had been crushed, and it felt just like an egg shell, And it was just really most gratifying to especially bring back a person who was just so happy and had never expected to be home again.
God bless you. I'll tell you what, I've interviewed a lot of guys from World War II. And I always ask them a similar question, Ed, and I ask them, how did you get through it when it was really tough? Battle of the Bulge or on these islands, and it was day after day after day. And, most of them told me they just didn't think they were going to get home. They gave up believing that they were going to get home. They just were going to do that day and the next day, and they kind of assumed that somewhere along the way they weren't going to make it back home. And I think that kind of explains a little bit about what he was thinking when you did that. God bless you for doing that.
Yeah.
I try to ask all the right questions, and I could talk with you a lot longer, but I don't want you to be late for dinner, and it sounds like they're quieting down there, so I want to get you back down there. Is there a question, Edna, that you wish I had asked you, or something you think is important to mention that we didn't talk about yet?
Well, of course, we were on a base with hundreds of male personnel, and as I said, I had 3 dates one day, and one of the guys came in, and I said, "Now I have another date at noontime, and you got to leave." And he hung around, and the man that I eventually married was coming in the front door. I said, out the back door.
There are a couple of blues songs about that, in fact. Well, because I've heard this. I interviewed a young lady who was at Pearl Harbor when it was bombed, but she was young, and she said you could stack your dates. You could go out for an early evening date, and have a late evening date, and there were just this many women and this many men, and it was...
That's right.
Girls' dream come true, practically.
Well, so it was real funny because one of the pilots said something about one day there was this girl that wasn't particularly attractive, and he said, "Well, you could just put a paper bag over her head and it wouldn't make any difference."
I guess the world doesn't change all that much. Is what I'm thinking.
Let me tell you about my life raft experience.
Oh, I forgot. Please do, yes. Yes, absolutely.
Well, we always had to go down to the flight line after midnight because if we flew through a midnight, they had to pay us per diem. So they would set the flight up to go after midnight, and of course we'd be at our destination before the middle of the next afternoon or something. Anyway, they had this life raft sitting out there on the floor, and I had gone down and they had a little engine problem, and so they had to do some a little maintenance, and I was kind of tired, and I thought, oh, that life raft looks as though it'd be comfortable. I guess I'll go over there and have a nap there. So I went over and crawled into it, and in a few minutes I heard mumble, mumble, and I opened one eye, and here was this sergeant briefing a load of passengers on how to ditch at sea. And he was really going along pretty well, and he finally turned around and he says, "Oh, well," he says, "the flight nurse is not standard equipment." So I thought, well, we got that over with. I guess I might just well stay here. Well, of course, he brought in another group, and of course, by then he had his speech down pat.